Hi and welcome to Rose Red Homestead MicroMoment Monday, where today we are going to talk about whether or not it is safe to do cakes in jars. Before we get started on that, I just want to say a couple of things. First of all, as I'm sure that you figured out, we do not make our videos on the same day that they're going to be launched. We make them in advance. And so this is a Friday, and this particular video won't be seen until Monday, 3 days from now. This Friday, the 29th of July, 2022, is the day that my sister Cindy and I launched our new book. And I just want to say thank you so much for the overwhelming response that we have had. So many of you are going to our bookstore to look at it, and some of you are purchasing that, and we're very grateful for that. But the thing that has been so heart-rending for Cindy and me, and we've been on the phone several times today with each other talking about some of the comments that we are getting, and they make us cry with gratitude for our wonderful community, for the kind things that you are saying, for the well wishes, for the congratulations on our book. This is really a monumental moment in our lives, especially for Cindy. You know, I'm a published author in scientific journals. Cindy has never published anything, and so she just is so excited. You know, I have always been her big sister. Mother and dad, with 9 children in the family, always assigned an older one to a younger one to kind of be their mentor and to watch after them. And I was assigned to Cindy early on, and I would fix her hair for school and make sure she had clean clothes, and that was kind of my job. And so we have been quite connected through all of our lives. But this is a fabulous day for us, and thank you for making it so fabulous. And we appreciate our community so much. Okay, a couple of weeks ago we made a video on whether or not we should throw food away from our food storage after going through and finding some things, and we found a jar of applesauce that was all blackish on the top. And I said to the camera, I said, this will go. And then I set it aside. This we're going to get rid of, and I set it aside. I did not show you how we did that. And that has elicited many questions about, did you throw the jar away? And people were worried about, in these days when jars are so hard to come by, when some food spoils on the inside, are you supposed to throw the whole jar away? And the answer to that is no, not just no, but my goodness sakes, no, with one exception. And that is if it is known that botulism is in the jar, that we don't take any chances with, and the jar and the food go in the trash. That has never happened to me. I doubt it will ever happen to you. What I did with that applesauce, it was I dumped it down the garbage disposal. I washed the jar out with hot soapy water and ran it through sanitizing cycle on the dishwasher, and it's good to go. I don't know if this is the exact jar. I'm just holding this up to illustrate. Lately, I've been getting a number of questions about, is it safe to make cakes in jars or bread in jars? Some people are saying once you do that and you put the lid on and it forms a vacuum, it has a shelf life of a year. Yikes! So I decided to investigate a little bit, and this is what I found. I'm going to talk through 3 different ways that I saw online. Now, I don't have a lot of time to visit other people's YouTube channels. I depend a lot on you all to tell me when some things are going on. But I did check on these. I probably quickly skimmed through about 10 that I found. So this was one that I saw several times. Let's see, I'm going to set this over here. And this is where the cake is baked separately in the oven on a sheet cake, much thinner than what you would normally do. Now, Jim and I don't eat a lot of cake. I bought these as a cake mix. You might be able to tell that it's been a while since I even baked a cake. I don't know what happened to the cake here. Jim, do you have any idea where this cake went?
Gremlins.
Gremlins? Gremlins named Jim, maybe?
No, not me. That would be terrible. That would be theft.
So anyway, once it is flat out like a sheet, Then what you do is you take a cutter and you cut little rounds of the cake. And then you drop it in like a pint jar. This one fits just perfectly. That was lucky. And then, and I'm just doing this quick and dirty, then you layer it with something, pudding or ice cream. In this case, I'm just going to do some whipped cream for a layer. And then you put another layer over the top and press that down to where it makes these fancy little cakes. And you can even do them in smaller jars like this for kids. Kids' birthday parties, imagine this with, I have one that fits in this one as well, that would do the little cake layers with ice cream in between and decorations and all kinds of different things and bows, and they make them so fancy. And so they layer them like this. A lot cuter than what I have just done, more clever. Different colors, different cakes and that sort of thing. So then it is possible then that you would put a lid and a ring on this. And the cake has cooled. So where should you store this? On your pantry shelf? I can just hear you all saying, no! And that, fortunately, is what the people that I watched, all three of them, said, store these in your refrigerator for 3 to 5 days. And I nearly celebrated, because that is exactly how these can be safely done, is if they are stored in the refrigerator for not more than 4 or 5 days, they are perfectly fine. Don't leave these out on your countertop. Don't drop these over at the neighbor's house if they're not home and leave them on their front porch. If you're going to give these as gifts, make sure that you hand them exactly to the person and say, keep this in your refrigerator and it's good until Thursday or whatever. So this is a great way to do cakes in jars. This has my stamp of approval, provided things go in the refrigerator if they have especially things like whipped cream or pudding, anything with dairy in it. And then they are handed off as gifts person to person with a deadline. The other thing that I saw was in a pint jar, this person started off by saying, canning jars are made for high heat, so they are perfectly fine to use in your oven. That is a false statement. And so manufacturers of canning jars, in their description of the product, say canning jars are tempered glass, tempered specifically for canning in water and steam. They are not tempered for oven use. Now, a lot of people put them in the oven, a lot of people put them in the freezer. Either of those weakens the glass and makes it more likely that you're going to have a break in your jar when you use it for canning again. So that was the one thing on this particular video that I disagreed with. Yes, these can withstand high heat up to about 250 degrees and also under pressure at about 15 psi. They are not made for use in the oven. Now, what this person did was drop fruit, blueberries and strawberries, and then put in a mixture of flour and sugar and a little bit of salt with a pat of butter on the top, and then put it in the oven to bake for however long. Took it out of the oven, let it cool with the jar open, then put the lid on, or put some whipped cream with a strawberry right on the top, and then mashed that down with a lid on the top. And then she said, be sure that you store these in the refrigerator. They'll be good in the fridge for 3 to 4 days. So, phew, that part was also okay, except for the baking part. The next example is the one that I got the most questions about, and that is taking a quart jar, spraying the inside and then filling it with some kind of cake batter or bread batter, like zucchini bread, or it would be like my cranberry banana bread, and then filling the jar halfway full. So we're going to put this in the oven. While it's baking, I'll talk to you about a couple of things. Okay, first of all, what I'm doing there breaks the rule about not using canning jars for baking. But there's a more important thing that is a threat and a danger for this particular thing. So let's think through that. So what's going to happen is the cake will bake. It'll come all the way almost to the top. And then there was no consistency at all about what people did after that. Sometimes they put a lid and a ring on immediately when it was right hot out of the oven, and they said everything is now sanitized and it's good. One woman was preparing some of these cakes in smaller jars to send to her husband, who was stationed overseas in the military, and others said, we give these for gifts to our friends. And I'm just sitting there almost shaking, thinking about the possibilities that could happen there. Now, if you've watched our videos for a long enough time at all, you know quite a bit about botulism. That is the biggest threat to these cakes or breads in jars. We know that botulism spores are all around us, all around us. They're in the air, they're in the soil, they're in water. And so while the probability is very low that botulism spores are in that cake batter, the possibility still exists. And so we first of all have to decide whether we're willing to take that chance. Now, we know that if we pressure can a food that is low acid, for instance, that we have to get it up to 240 degrees, between 240 and 250 is the kill zone, and it has to be in that zone for long enough, according to the food industry algorithm, that is what I use when I use my gadget to test foods. And then we can be assured that we have the strongest probability that we have killed any botulism spores that may have existed. The argument that people say is, well, the oven is 350 degrees. That's more than enough to kill those botulism spores. All right, we're going to put a pin in that and hold that question for just a minute, because we're going to test that. When that comes out of the oven, it will have been in a 350 oven for 20 minutes, I'm guessing. I've never baked in a jar before, so I don't know. Between 20 and 30 minutes. We're going to test to see what the internal temperature is, to see if it even got up to 240 in a 350 oven. I bake my bread in a 375 oven for 25 minutes. And it is done on the inside, and I take it out when the temperature has reached 190 degrees. So just because the oven says 375 does not mean that the internal temperature of that food has reached 375 degrees. So we're going to test that. So the second thing about botulism is, we know from our videos that we've done several times that the botulism spore can only go vegetative and begin to grow and reproduce under certain conditions. Low or no oxygen. Would a cake or bread sealed in a jar have low or no oxygen? Everybody nod your head up and down. Yes, it would. Second thing, the temperature is about what our homes are. Between about, I can't remember exactly, but it is either side of 70 degrees by about 15 or 20 degrees. Ideal pantry temperature, is that where those will be stored? Because they say shelf life for 1 year, which infers that you're going to just put it on your shelf somewhere. Okay, so that is a difficulty. And then the third thing is they need moisture. That is why when we dehydrate foods, we want to get as much of the moisture out so that the moisture level is 10% moisture or below. That's what freeze drying does. That's what dehydrating does. And so think about a cake. Does it have moisture? Oh yes. Little or no oxygen? Oh yes. Storage temperature correct for those to vegetate and reproduce and produce the toxin? Oh yes. So what do you think? Is it safe to bake cakes in jars and then give them to gifts? Especially, and this is what just freaked me out, if you leave them on a doorstep if somebody isn't home so they'll find them when they get home. What if they're on vacation and they don't find it until a week later and they pick it up and it still looks good and they feed it to their family? I cringe to even think about that possibility. We will come back when our cake in a jar is done. We're going to check to see if it even got up to 240 degrees. We'll be back. It appears to be done, so I'm going to bring it out of the oven. All right, here goes. Taking the temperature. Right down in the middle. .207 degrees. Not even close to the kill zone for botulism. 207. So there is our evidence right there. And then what people do is they'll put a lid on here and a ring and dress it up all fancy. And don't think of how gorgeous it may look, but think about what's inside the jar and how it was prepared. So you have enough information now, I have enough information now to make our own decisions on whether or not these are safe ideas. And so we can judge for ourselves about what other people may think and do. And if we have an opportunity to try to talk people out of doing this, then we would be doing that person and anyone that they might gift a cake like this to a great service. Clemson University, the USDA has said, don't do this. And I believe them. I hope you do too. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next Monday.